Welcome to Start with Hello Conversations about Disability. Okay, I hope everyone is ready because we are going to talk about everybody's favorite topic in disability ministry, sex, right? And I remember this was pretty recent. Our church did a series on this topic from the pulpit. And I remember there being just a ton of disclaimers that went out beforehand. And I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to prepare families for what is about to come from the pulpit. But still there were a lot of heads up before we heard any of those sermons. And I was trying to think back, and I honestly cannot remember a time when I was in Sunday school and where I heard detailed discussions about sex. So let's just hit this topic. We're going to hit the ground running. And I just want to go ahead and come right out of the gate and ask you, do you think that churches intentionally avoid the topic of sex and sexuality? And if so, why do you think that is?
I would say the answer is yes. I think churches do avoid it. Not every church, obviously. There's some churches that are probably better than others about tackling the subject head on. But I do think the vast majority of churches avoid the topic. I think there's a ton of reasons why. I'd say I'll give you two or three that I think are prevalent, though. Number one, I just think that people feel like it's too uncomfortable to talk about, that the leader doesn't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable. And he knows just how much it makes people feel uncomfortable in the audience when the subject is brought up. So I think that's number one. I think number two, the reason that churches avoid talking about it is because I feel like um, and this may sound wrong, and it is wrong, but I feel like there's a sliding scale of morality, like what is and is not okay. And I think sometimes churches are afraid to offend people. Like if they're going to stand up for the truth of what the Bible says, but that's not necessarily what society says or what most people in churches are doing because they think it's okay. I just think churches are afraid to offend people because of that sliding scale of morality. The third thing I would say that people avoid talking about sex in churches is because people just feel unqualified to talk about it. And again, I don't think anybody in leadership in a church should feel unqualified to talk about it, because it's not about opinions. It's not about where is the line of morality. Like I said, it's like there's a sliding scale for it in society and in churches. There isn't, because there is truth in the Bible, and leaders shouldn't be afraid to proclaim the truth that is in the Bible. It's not about opinion. This conversation is not about opinions. This is not about fearing of offending someone because of where the line of morality sits. Um, this is just about standing on the truth. But I think those are reasons why some churches avoid talking about the topic of sex.
And I was looking through one of the articles that you wrote, and this one was titled 30 Wrong Assumptions About Disability. Now, I don't know if you remember that, but number 18 on that list is people with disabilities do not have sexual or romantic needs. My question is why would that even be on a list of assumptions about disabilities?
I think it goes back to again a wrong view about disability. I think there are a lot of people that view people with intellectual developmental disabilities as less than human. And as I say that out loud, it's like, oh my gosh, who could actually believe that? But I think this idea that people with disabilities don't have sexual or romantic needs is just reflective of the fact that people view people with disabilities as less than human. Some people think that someone who has a lower IQ, doesn't understand complex things like romance and sexuality. But again, I think that is absolutely false. I don't think sexual needs or urges are things that are IQ dependent. I think all people have these needs, all people have these urges. So where regardless of where you're at on, the IQ scale. So if all people are experiencing these things, the church needs to talk about it in all different arenas, including disability ministries.
So obviously, it's sexist is a topic that it applies. It's going to apply to everybody, disability or not. This is something that needs to be spoken about in the disability community. And it also appears that it's sadly rarely addressed for a variety of reasons. So I want to throw this out there. Let's say that I work at a church. I'm thinking, okay, you know what? I know that I've got to start talking about this. I call you up because I feel lost. I need advice on, okay, we're going to start talking about this stuff. And I have no idea where I should begin. So, what advice are you going to give me?
I think first of all, if somebody was to reach out to me and say we're going to talk about that, first thing I'm going to say is thank you. Thank you for being one of the rare few people that are willing to talk about real issues that affect real people. So that would be my first stance is just one of thankfulness. But I think I would throw the question back to the person, and I would say, well, take away the disability factor, and I would ask them, how would you handle it if disability wasn't involved? Because I really like to push people to consider the fact that people are people. Uh, Whether you have a disability or not doesn't change how you should tackle a lot of these situations. A lot of these situations should be tackled the same. So think people have a good idea in mind. And I think sometimes we just have to be reminded that people are people. So that would be the first thing I would do. I'd throw it back to them and see what their ideas are and probably just confirm them in that. The second thing I would probably do is just encourage them to rely on the truth and not on opinions or what society or the world would say about sexuality, because what society and the world says is incredibly warped. And unfortunately, again, the church, tends to tail society often, and it's not about what you think. And this is just I don't know how many times I can say this, but I just want to continue to say it. It's not about what you think about it. It's not about what the opinions of people are about it. It's about what the truth is and what the Bible says. And so I think when leaders understand that they're standing on the Word of God, when they're standing on truth, it takes away some of the fear because they're not coming at it from approach of I'm sorry I'm offending you because this is my opinion about what is right when it comes to sexuality. It's about what God says, and we stand on that truth, and I think that takes away some of the fears. The next thing I would encourage people to do is figure out your delivery system. And I think we'll talk about this probably in the next question, but whether you're dealing with this on a personal level with an individual, maybe there's a situation that's come up in your church, or maybe this is something that needs to be addressed at the group level with your whole ministry or with a group of guys or a group of gals. So just you need to figure out your delivery system. You need to make sure that when you're doing this, the next bit of advice that I would give people would be never go at it alone, because there's always these situations when you're talking about something that's tricky, like sexuality, when people have very charged opinions about things. That they could take and run with whatever you say, and they can get you in some hot water. So never go at it alone. Always take another staff member, another volunteer, an elder, a deacon with you whenever you figure out that delivery system of how you're going to go about doing it. Just make sure you have other people that are higher than you in the reporting chain at church that will be there to witness what is said, so nothing can come back and hurt you again just because people are highly charged in their opinions about sexuality. Fall back on the truth. Make sure you have people there that can back you. Figure out a good delivery system. Always give people disclaimers. If you're going to talk about it, make sure they know that you're going to talk about it. It doesn't take them by surprise. So that would be some of the, some higher level kind of advice that I would give churches that are looking to tackle the topic of sexuality.
And I'm glad you brought up that delivery system? Because that is one of the questions that I had wanted to talk about. I guess my fear when I think about any of these resources that we create instantly, because I had been teaching our teen disability ministry class for years, I start thinking, how would I apply this to my class? And if the leadership came up and said, all right, the next 8 weeks, we're going to be talking about sex, I'm instantly starting to think about who is there in my class and how how we can communicate this material to a variety of people. And one of the things that I kind of struggled with, and I don't know if other churches have thought about it this way, but what I didn't want to happen was, well, we've got this one person, they're kind of struggling with this topic, so we're going to isolate them. We're going to take somebody in an isolated community, isolate them even more, and do more of a one-on-one kind of training, if you will, with them, when really this could be something that would benefit everybody. So I'm wondering, like, in terms of to go back to the delivery system, how do you feel about talking about something like sex in a Sunday school class type setting over a period of weeks? Or do you feel like, wow, this really is more of a one-on-one kind of thing?
I think the answer is yes.
I knew you
Not
were going to say that.
the not to take the cop out answer, but I think this goes back to one of the principles that we believe about disability ministry is it's not a cutter ministry. It's not a black and white ministry. It's a ministry somewhere in the gray. Um, every ministry is different. And I think every leader knows their disability ministry far better than we could ever know it because we're somebody from the outside looking in. So I think the approach has to be your ministry the best. That said, after some situations at my church when I was doing full time disability ministry, I felt the best approach was to tackle it as a group. I'd seen enough examples within the ministry that it felt like it felt like one of those moments where you're like, I'm wondering if I should do this. And it's like it's the proverbial 2x4 that the Holy Spirit hits you up the head with. So I'm just like, okay, this is something that I can no longer put off. So, this is something that I did, a series of 4 week where we talked about romantic relationships and what God's plan was for it. Again, not my opinion, not what is currently believed to be okay and acceptable about sexuality, but what does the Bible actually say about it and how it pertains to romantic relationships. Obviously, you're not going to roll this out in your children's ministry. You're going to reserve this for adults. You probably would want to include some teens in this as well, because we know when hormones set in, if people are not equipped with the truth, they're going to struggle. So for me, we approached it as a full class. We did it over a span of 4 weeks. Obviously, there were the disclaimers that we were going to talk about it. We let people know in advance. So if they didn't feel comfortable with being a part of that conversation, that for 4 weeks, they could go into the service instead of coming into the class. So they had a different option. So you obviously want to make sure that you can warn people so they know what's coming. But like I've talked with other churches on this subject, and some other churches felt like, the best delivery system for them was to create an elective that either could run concurrent with their class, that people could choose to go to this elective instead of their regular class, or to offer it as like a Saturday seminar where they could invite people to come in. Another church that I talked to, felt like the best delivery system for them was to split up the guys and the girls so they could talk a little bit more freely and comfortably about different issues with guys and girls. And I think that can be a great approach. I think that can be a really good and effective one. So again, unfortunately, answering your question with just yes. Yeah, I think people know their groups the best. Whether the idea of addressing this issue has come from a specific situation, or whether it's a reoccurring thing, or whether it's just, hey, This is good information. God's not silent on the topic of sexuality. It is a real issue for all people, not, excluded for just people that are neurotypical. This is also something that people with disabilities need trained on the truth with. So there's a lot of different approaches to it. I think they can all be good based on you knowing your group the best. So, and again, if somebody's like kind of caught up with wondering what to do, they can reach out to us and we can do a free consultation for them and kind of walk them through with what might be best for them and help lay out some options. So that's always an option for churches if they're just like saying, okay, we know we need to do something, but we're not exactly sure.
And you had mentioned talking about this with one of your classes, and I know we have the More Than Friends curriculum series, which obviously talks about that. What happens when you want to be more than just friends with somebody? And when I was looking through our resources, that was one of the few we haven't really touched too much on this topic. And I think that was something that stood out to you. And you said, "Hey, look, we need more on our website for churches because they're going to encounter this." So walk me through what were those resources that you wanted to create, and how did those come about?
Yeah, the More Than Friends curriculum series that we have for adults, it was actually something that was developed based on the series that I taught at my church many years ago, just because I kept running into different situations that, it was just the Lord reminding me, hey, don't be a wimp, talk about these issues. So that's where kind of the More Than Friends curriculum series came from. Was based off of something that I taught many years ago when I was doing full time disability ministry. But that's again, that's not going to be for everybody. But we wanted to create something that would be for everybody, something that would be free. Obviously, the More Than Friends curriculum, there's a cost to that. So what we decided to develop recently was two different one-page documents that talk about healthy sexuality. So the first document that we created was healthy sexuality in romantic relationships. We recognize the fact that people with disabilities, just like everybody else, have interest in becoming part of a romantic relationship. And so the way that we created this resource at the top of this resource and the top of the next resource that I'll mention in a second is that little disclaimer that just basically says, hey, this is not just for people with disabilities because God's plan for healthy sexuality, he doesn't have like a sub plan where he says, okay, this is a plan for healthy sexuality for neurotypical people. And here's the sub plan if you have an intellectual and developmental disability. The Bible doesn't do that. So we don't do that. So we break down what healthy sexuality looks like in romantic relationships based on the plan that God gives us in the Bible. And again, it's a one-page document, it's a free document. So people can download that, they can print that. And what I would recommend is that every ministry print that, whether you're tucking that in the sleeve of your Bible or you're putting that in your notebook of resources, make sure you have it handy because if you got a situation where people are getting romantically involved, you want to be able to guide them. You don't want to have to stand there and try to Google it real time. What Bible verses can I look up that will be helpful? All right there on this document. So print that healthy sexuality and romantic relationships. But we understand that this conversation about healthy sexuality doesn't start when you get into a romantic relationship. Being healthy sexually starts before you get into a romantic relationship. So we created the second resource. Again, it's another one-page document. It's called Healthy Sexuality in Christian Singles. God has a plan for all people, no asterisks, for all people when it comes to living a life that is sexually pure. Because if you have a sexually pure life when you're a single, you're better equipped to have a sexually healthy relationship when you get into romantic relationships when you're leading up to marriage. So if you're starting off pure and you're not bringing problems into your relationship, you're going to be so much better off. So the conversation can't start just when you get into romantic relationships. It's got to start when people are single. And that's why I think the conversation is something that should be had with all people in your groups, because eventually people are going to move into, their interest in the opposite sex. They're going to want to, start up a romantic relationship. They're going to want to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You got to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend before you can have a husband or a wife. So it's a process, and we have some different tips on how to stay healthy sexually while you're single on this document. Again, it's a must-have resource that you should print off, tuck in, the cover of your Bible, or keep in a document resource, folder that you can have at the ready when you run into these things, because it won't be a matter of if, but it'll be a matter of when you run into these things. So again, both of those one-page documents are free. You can download them today. You can have them for when you run into these conversations, or you can have them and they're great preparation for you to plan on having these conversations. The other thing that I would say, and I'll tease this a little bit because we don't really have a date when we're going to release this yet, but one of the things on our content development list is a devotional, a sexual purity devotional. And that's something that hopefully we'll begin working on fairly soon, that we can release and be a resource for people. It's a process. And people, God has a plan for people, and the plan for people with disabilities is not different than the plan for people without disabilities. So we want this devotional to kind of help walk people through how to live a life that is pleasing to God in the realm of sexual purity. So, just teasing that a little bit as a resource to come sometime.
And I know when we start thinking about this is great. Okay, I've downloaded More Than Friends, and we're going to talk about that. And I've got the one-page documents, and it's all of these things are super helpful. And we know not all of us can be prepared for every single scenario that pops up in disability ministry, because there are a lot of different scenarios. But if we talk about them openly and realistically, I think a lot of that can help, like with these real world scenarios. So I've got three of them, and we're going to talk through each one because, like you said just a minute ago, all of these issues, it's going to be, as you said a couple minutes ago, it's not an if, it's when that this is going to come up. The first situation that I wanted to bring up, there was a time when you were teaching, you were up on stage, and this was an adult class, and you were actually pulled off stage because there was, and I'll leave it at this, an issue that you had to address. And obviously, since we're talking about sex, you can kind of guess where we're going with this, but I'll let you explain it as to what was happening, what made you have to stop teaching and leave the stage.
Well, this is a crazy story, but it's a true story. And like I said a few minutes ago, the Holy Spirit 2x4 upside the head. This was the moment where I realized I could no longer put off talking about God's plan for sexuality in the world of disability ministry. It was one of those things. I did 15 years of ministry in the local church, and it wasn't until probably the later portion of that I got hit in the head, and God said, "Okay, you got to talk about this. I've got a plan for this. It's a plan that's good. It will help people." So here's what happens. And now imagine this: my adult class at my church is a very large class. At the time, we were probably running close to 80 people in this class. So the largest Sunday school class at our church. When you look at 80 people, that's larger than the average size of churches in America. I think one of the latest studies that came out said that the average size of churches in America is about 60 people. So this is a big group, and I can't imagine the security team at our church doing this to any other staff member. It's in the smack dab in the middle of my lesson. The security team comes in, 3 different guys. They're all dressed in black. They've got, their headphones on, their radios, and they walk straight up to me in the middle of the class. And I'm like, first thing that's going through my mind is like, "Oh my goodness, like, is there like an active shooter?" Like, what are situations that would warrant the full security team coming in and telling me that I have to stop teaching and come with them? So it was a crazy, but they were like, "We can't tell you. We just need you to come with us." And I'm like, is my family in danger? So I'm a little free. First, I'm perturbed because I was interrupted in the middle of the lesson, and I've got to leave a class full of 80 adults with my volunteers with no prep.
And
So a little
I think
perturbed.
if security stops you from being on stage and says you got to come with me, I think you got to give me a weapon too, right? Like I don't want to go
Yeah,
unarmed. Like I don't know what's about to
right.
happen.
So it's crazy, right? So first I'm perturbed, and then second, the reality of the situation sets in. They're like, "We can't tell you. Just need to come with us." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, something's terribly wrong. Like, is there something wrong? Like something happened to my someone in my family? Is there a shooter in the building?" So I walk out of the room. Thankfully, I have great volunteers that could step in a moment like that. And I'm walking down a back hallway with them, and I'm like, "Guys, what's going on? This is ridiculous." And they're like, "Well, we caught on the cameras a couple that we think is from your class." So they didn't even know for sure. They said, "We're pretty sure, but we don't know for sure if they're from your class. We think they are. Sneak up the back hallway and go into a bathroom together." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I know what's going on here." I didn't know who it was. Obviously, I didn't see the camera footage, but they were like, "We're pretty sure that they're from your ministry, so we want you to be the one that goes into the bathroom and checks this out." And I'm
So
like, "Oh,
you speak some kind of unique language that apparently nobody else in the church can speak, right?
I guess."
Like, are
And
you
I'm
going to go
like,
translate? I don't. Some of that could be a whole nother episode in and of itself. You know, I could just see it now. We need you to come deal with these people, right? Like they're
Yeah,
aliens.
it was definitely one of those moments. So like frustration set in again because I'm like, "You're the security team for the church. You guys are trained in all different kinds of things. Why couldn't you have just handled this? Let me finish my lesson." So, but like it was just such a surreal moment that I was just all these things trying to process these things in my mind. I just like, okay, going in. so so I open the bathroom door. All the lights are out in the bathroom and I heard things that obviously need no interpretation, things that were going on inside a single stall. So imagine the moment for me as the ministry leader knocking on the stall door and saying, "Excuse me." So it was such an embarrassing moment for everybody involved. They did end up being a couple that was romantically involved in our ministry. They were mortified, as was I. So I said, "Hey guys, this is not something that we want to be happening at church. So if you guys could get dressed and come out, love to talk to you guys." So it was in that moment where I'm like, going back in time, I'm like, I wish I had that one-page document about healthy sexuality and romantic relationships. That would have been really helpful in the time. But so they came out. We talked. Obviously, they were mortified. They found their providers. They left. This is something that obviously we followed up with them. We talked with their providers, tried to help them understand that we love them. We didn't want them to have this embarrassing moment to be an obstacle for them coming back because we wanted to know that they're always welcome. And so we make sure that we communicated that over and over again. But unfortunately, because of the embarrassment of the moment, I mean, obviously this is not something that we shared with anyone else. But because of the embarrassment of the moment, they never came back to the class, but maybe a handful of times after that. They would stay engaged at like the big event level, but never at the smaller event level. But that was the moment where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like I've got to do something," and that's where I started developing our More Than Friends series that I originally taught back at the church, and now that we have available for ministries to use, because we do want to get God's plan for healthy sexuality in the hands of people. All people need that plan, including people with disabilities. And I'd like to think that that would have made a difference had we done that prior. I don't know necessarily that it would have, but we would have definitely had our folks more equipped with God's plan for sexuality. And I'd like to believe again that that would have made a difference in this situation. So yeah, that was one of those crazy moments, and I'm sure, yeah, as people are listening to that, right, they're probably thinking about other moments that they have had. in their ministries, or maybe they're like, okay, this is the warning that we needed to, wake up to the fact that we need to do something and we need to talk about this as well.
And I think that's why it's important to talk about it, because I think in a lot of the disability ministry training I've been in, I hear quite frequently, well, you got to be ready for anything. And really with any ministry, got to be ready for anything. I still believe that like there's that part of me that's like, well, I never thought of that, and being in that moment, you got to think on your feet. But hearing these things, it kind of normalizes it. It's like, okay, well, yeah, this is something that could happen, and here's some tools that I can have and pass out to staff or volunteers, and like, hey, if you encounter these kind of things, let's bring this back to the Bible. Like that, I love that resource. What does the Bible say about disability? So it's nice to have that foundation, but it also helps you kind of be prepared for things that are going to come up, a very real world topic that you're going to have to talk about, which leads me to another scenario, and I believe this one involves a restroom. You had been approached by a staff member who pulled you aside, and they said, "We need your help because of something that they encountered in a bathroom." I think this one had to do with a urinal. So I'm going to let you explain this one as to why, again, your expertise was called.
Exactly. So again, this was another staff member. This was back when I was doing full-time disability ministry in the local church. It was Monday morning. The staff member knocks on my office door and he says, "Hey man, you got a minute?" Anytime you hear that, he's like, "There's something I need to talk to you about." And anytime you hear that, you're like, "Oh man, what happened now?" It's one of those situations. And he walked in and you could tell like he was like completely embarrassed. He didn't even know where to start. But he said, "I went into the bathroom at church." And in our church, like the main restrooms, there's like a wall of like probably 15 urinals. And then like further down the wall, there's probably like 10 more stalls. So like very large bathroom, wide open, obviously. He said, "I walked into the main guy's restroom." And again, it was one of those situations where he's like, "I saw one of your guys." And he goes like, "Oh, people belong to me? I didn't know that." But he said, "I saw one of your guys masturbating into the urinal." And this was during church service. And he's like, "I froze. I didn't know what to do. So I didn't say anything. I just kind of walked out like shocked. And here I am telling you because I want you to deal with it." So I'm like, "Oh, thank you for letting me know." So we identified who it was, and based on who it was, our disability ministry has had some history with the individual with some other, issues pertaining to this. So I wasn't like shocked, surprised, because again, this is something that has happened in the past. So as a result, we set up a meeting with the individual. This individual lived at home with his parents. So obviously, we brought the parents into the situation. Just say, "Hey, here's a situation that was brought to my attention by another staff member, where they witnessed your son, masturbating in the urinal at church, and we just want to talk through that and make sure we're all on the same page about how that's something that's not appropriate, to be done in public at church. We can talk about the issue of masturbation further, but in this situation, we just talked through that, and we said, we've noticed a little bit of a pattern here. We want to make sure that we are all on the same understanding about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate, and try to help this individual kind of moving forward. Because obviously, you do that, anywhere in public, you're potentially gonna get arrested, indecent exposure. We don't want this kind of thing, to happen. So we talk through all those things. Again, super uncomfortable, but again, trying to bring back the truth to it. Is this the behavior that God would want for us or not? Again, because of our past history, we understood that this was something that he was probably doing because of being stimulated because of those sexual urges that people have. Sometimes in the conversation of masturbation, when it comes to disability community, I think you have to divide out motivation. Is this being done because of a moment of lust? Did the individual see something? Was he or her stimulated by something? Was that the motivation that led to them masturbating, or was or is masturbation an issue of simply stimulation, where feels good, so I do it. Both are inappropriate, obviously, to be done at church or anywhere in public. But I think we have to be careful of kind of dividing the motivation behind it, because I think that develops a plan or an approach to how to attack the issue with the individual, and how you're going to have that conversation. So sometimes you got to do a little bit of research of what's going on to help you have a good game plan on how to approach it, because I think there is a little bit of difference there in how you would approach that issue in particular, because I know that's a big issue in the disability community when it comes to just dealing with appropriate and inappropriate responses to stimulation, especially when in public.
And I like what you said about this was an uncomfortable or it was a difficult conversation to had, but we did have it. And we were talking
Exactly.
before we started recording. I don't know how you grew up, but when I grew up, conservative Southern Baptist church, there wasn't a lot of open communication about sex and desire and these things. And I'm thankful that I'm at a church now where they're not going to shy away from difficult conversations. Where else should we be having these conversations? I want everybody in our class to feel like, well, I don't know. I'm not really comfortable talking about it at school, but like I feel better if I could talk about it at church because I know they're going to give me, the right answer. And I think that's an important thing to know, about your class and your church. And hopefully these resources will give you a really firm foundation to stand on and how to communicate it. But the last scenario I wanted to throw out there is one that you've seen. It's one that I know I've seen. This could come across, I could see as well. Now we're just picking on guys. This could actually cross over between both male and female, but there are times when some of our friends, they seem to get a little too attached to someone else, and I've seen it labeled creeper or stalking or the touchy feely guy. There's a lot of different labels that could be applied to this, which is really somebody, maybe they get a little too close to what some might refer as stalking. How would you handle these situations at your church?
I'm glad, Jason, that you said that it's not just a issue with men. We have seen this very much on the side of women too, in our church, where there's a certain obsession with an individual in particular, or it's just an obsession with anybody that they see walk through the doors that they think is attractive, or it's not just a guy's issue or girl's issue. It's just an issue, again, that has to do with, am I living a life that is pleasing to God in the world of sexuality? So I'll go into kind of a specific situation to kind of help you see how we tackled it in our ministry. So we had an individual that very much is attracted to nice looking ladies, and he makes no excuses about it. In fact, we'd often find him standing in the lobby of our church, just waiting for certain individuals to walk in, to the point where he would follow them around. And what makes this even more uncomfortable is a lot of times they'd be teenage girls, and this is someone who is an adult male and can be viewed as very intimidating, especially as he's following around younger girls. And obviously, when you're in the midst of ministry, getting set up, getting things ready, getting your class ready, you don't always have time to be eyes in the hallway to see what all the individuals in your ministry are doing. So we weren't aware that this was happening, because we were busy, obviously, getting our rooms ready, making sure we had enough volunteers, making sure they got the curriculum, resources ready to go to teach. And again, here's a situation where security's bringing it to our attention, or even I've had different, parents of teenage girls set up a meeting with me. And again, these are things happening that I'm not aware of because I'm busy in the room doing ministry while we have different individuals that are kind of roaming the hallways, trying to find the prettiest young girls that they can find. Unfortunately, we've had situations where families have left the church because they felt like, they were being like, one of the words you use, stalked. So how do we handle it? Think we try to again fall on the truth and follow what the Bible says. We handled it just like it says in Matthew chapter 18, verses 15 and 16. I'll just read that for you. If your brother or sister sins against you, go to them. Tell them what they did wrong. Keep it between the two of you. If they listen to you, you've won them back. So the first thing, obviously, that we did was talk with them individually. Just to say, hey, this is brought to our attention. Again, this is not something that you can ignore. This is brought to our attention. This is unacceptable behavior. This is something, obviously, that could get you in big trouble. We don't want that for you. That's not the plan that God has for you. And then verse 16 says, but what if they won't listen to you? Then you take one or two others with you. Scripture says every matter must be proved by the words of two or three witnesses. Not only did we individually talk with this person and laid out, okay, this is unacceptable behavior. You don't you the end of the conversation can't be, hey, stop doing that. That can't be the plan. You gotta have more than that, because God has more than that. So we said, "Okay, it's unacceptable. Here's the plan moving forward. We're no longer gonna allow loitering at the lobby, at the main entrance of the church." The way our church is laid out, the way our adult class is in kind of the education wing on one end of the building, the youth ministry, the children's ministry is on the complete opposite end of the building. The dividing line is kind of like the lobby, the main lobby where people come in. So we just said to this individual, he said, "Hey, when you come to church, here's the plan. You're going to come straight to class. You're not going to be allowed to loiter in the lobby. We're going to let security know that if they see you in the lobby or on the other side, kind of heading towards the youth ministry, student ministry side of the building, that they're gonna redirect you uh, back to class. If that continues to happen, we're gonna have to have another conversation." Well, it continued to happen. So, we go back to Matthew chapter 18, verse 16. Come with 2 to 3 witnesses. So what do I do? Rather than trying to corner him at church because everything's too busy, we set up a meeting with him. This individual lived with a roommate on their own independently, so we just said he would love to come out and just sit down and have a conversation with you. Again, uncomfortable, but needs to be done. So we went out to his apartment. He was excited that we were there, even though we were about to have a really difficult conversation. He was so excited that he took us back to his bedrooms, 2 bedroom apartment. He and his roommate. He has his own bedroom. He takes us back into our bedroom, and like we're like, oh, okay. A lot of this behavior makes sense because his apartment was like wallpapered with posters of women in bikinis. So we're like, okay, the pieces of the puzzle are starting to come together. So I sat down myself as a staff member. I took an elder from the church with me that he knew and respected. Again, this is not, weren't there to scare him. We were there to just say, hey, we've talked about this once. It's happened again. You didn't follow the plan. Here's the deal. We're going to go over the plan again with you. We're going to let you know what the Bible says clearly about this, why it's unacceptable, what God's plan for you is to be healthy as an individual sexually. Obviously, it's not, surrounding yourself with, posters of women in bikinis and chasing girls at church. So we just had to say, hey, again, if this happens, we're going to have further consequences that you're not going to like. And you never want to get to the point where you tell somebody that they're no longer welcome at church. But I think you do have a responsibility as a leader in ministry to protect others as well. So when you have to come to these hard conversations, you got to put a plan in place that is good, not only for the individual, but for all the other individuals involved. So again, those were some of the issues, like, not you hate having to do, but you can't just push things aside when they have to be dealt with. Again, fall back on the truth in the Bible, come up with a plan that keeps everyone safe. This is not just, a plan for one person, it's for everybody involved in the situation, because you don't want people to feel uncomfortable coming to church or stop coming to church. You don't want to get to the point where you have to tell someone to not come anymore. But sometimes, the situation warrants that. You have to deal with that. So that was kind of how we dealt with the situation. I'd like to say that everything is perfectly fine. It's not always perfectly fine, and sometimes you have to have those hard conversations.
And I think that's important to mention. We absolutely cannot afford to ignore or avoid these difficult conversations because the cost of inaction, I think, is too high. A lot of this uncomfortableness, it goes both ways. When you were talking, one of the things that hit me was one of the things that I've been trying to work through is we have one or two young ladies that when they come into class, one in particular, it is just nonstop hugging to me, and I'm honestly uncomfortable with it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I have just told her, I'm like, well, you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, but then I'm like, I don't really need you just hanging all over me because I'm a dad too. And if I walked in to pick my kid up, I'm like, why is this other person draped all over them? Like, why are you allowing
yeah,
this? And you know,
absolutely.
I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want the parents to be uncomfortable or to it's not enough to avoid evil. We have to avoid the appearance of evil.
Yes.
And so I've just the minute she comes in, she just barrels towards me and I extend my hand out. I'm like, up, fist bump, and just trying to communicate politely, like I don't like hugs. I
Mhm.
really don't, especially there. I don't want anybody just hanging all over me. It's just uncomfortable. And I think it sends the wrong message. We can still be friends and we can
Right.
still talk about the lesson and how God has created all of us on purpose for a purpose. And we can do that without hanging all over each other and making each other uncomfortable. And
I'm so glad you brought that up, Jason, and that's one of the things that's on the healthy sexuality one-page documents, is how to handle those situations when someone's coming up for a hug, because we always say in ministry that, people wanna give you a hug, they love you, but sometimes you have to help them. Because when you're doing that front to front hug, you're lining up genitals, and that's not a situation anybody should be in. So if you're going to permit hugs at all, it should be the side hug. But like you said, the fist bump is just as good. The elbow bump's just as good. The high five is just as good. So come up with a policy, man, that you're not going to do any front to front hugs. You're not going to do any lap sitting. If you're in the children's ministry world, you don't want to line up any of those private parts ever for any reason. So yeah, I'm so glad that you brought that up. And again, that's something that's in the healthy sexuality one-page documents that we've created, just kind of reminding people of that important truth, of just taking the high road and not allowing yourself to get in a situation, an uncomfortable situation that you may not even be thinking about, because all it takes is one person saying one thing, and it doesn't matter at that point. Once somebody's made an accusation, usually you're toast.
and that's why I also like how you mentioned bringing somebody with you. In our ministry, and even with Rise Fitness, our inclusive fitness program, we're there should never be, in my opinion, there should never be any point in time where I am alone at church with someone else. And, we work pretty hard at that. And I know that there's been times where transition in between classes, volunteers are coming and going, people are coming and going. It's kind of chaotic. And there could be times where you've got 10 or 15 minutes of downtime and you've got a volunteer in the room with somebody else. And so I've gone up to our staff, just say, hey, just me back here, and kind of stay where people can see me. And one of the things through the safe sport training has just been ingrained in my head, and I think it's important. You'll never go wrong with this. Is that every single thing that I do should be observable and interruptible. At any point, anybody can come in and watch. Should be able to watch anything that we're doing, and at any point, anything that I'm doing, you could come up and interrupt me. would never be doing something in secret, alone. So I think that's
Good stuff.
important to mention. So all of this stuff is good stuff, in my opinion. And I think it's an important topic that should be talked about. It shouldn't be avoided. I mean, after all, if we're going to encounter it, we've got to talk about it. It to me, it just doesn't make much sense to say, well, sex is a thing, and I don't know, maybe it won't come up, and so you're never going to have to talk about it. I want to be prepared as much as possible. So if you're listening to this and you've got questions, or maybe there's a scenario that's that we haven't covered, or you just feel stuck. Ryan mentioned it earlier about the free consulting. So if you head to our website, abilityministry.com, at the top right, you'll see a button that says I want to. If you tap or click that, you can just select get free consulting, and we'd love to talk to you. We'll put all the links to all of these resources in the show notes. So encourage you to download those, all the free resources. It'd be a great training opportunity for your staff. Everybody come in 10 or 15 minutes early one day and pass these out and just say, hey, we want to talk over this, and then set up some time to meet if they need to go over it in greater detail. And before I close this out, I wanted to give just a small teaser about the next episode. I'm going to sit down and chat with Gary Spangler about Riverwood. I think a lot of people consider him and Ron experts on Riverwood and residential ministry, but we're going to have a very specific focus here. We're going to talk about the mission teams and why they are so critical to residential ministry. So stay tuned.
Disability in the Church, the nation's largest disability ministry conference, is coming to Orlando, May 1st through 3rd. Join Key Ministry and hundreds of ministry leaders for networking, training, collaboration, and innovation with 2 full days of sessions, plus an optional half-day of ministry intensives. This year, you can add up to 5 value-added events to your registration ticket at no charge, including a behind-the-scenes look at Make 'em Smile Orlando, hosted by Nathaniel's Hope. Visit keyministry.org/DATC 2024 for the complete schedule and access to the online registration. We'll see you in Orlando this May.